Good night. Welcome to 21st Century Tales, brought to you by COGNISCI. Tonight, I will tell you the story of the Prosecutor's wife. But before the wife, there was a merchant. And before the merchant, there was a sacred book. Surely, he is one. Everything is from him, and everything shall return to him. One is upon a time, while yesterday still lived inside today, and a coin was divine. There lived a merchant. Every morning, before setting out, he took with him his box of universes, surrounded by silicon and filled with rare earth elements. On that day, just as he was about to leave, he saw among the waiting letters the sealed address of that door, the password of which had been nailed into his mind for years. The door he had waited so long to reach was finally ready to open itself to him. He went to the long-awaited meeting without socks, wearing only simple sandals. His teeth left a metallic taste on his lips, and his eyes saw nothing but the place he wished to reach. When he arrived, the smell of sulfur and burnt rubber filled his nose, and a trembling from somewhere deep below had settled into his hands. The person waited before the door closed one eye and bowed his head, as if inviting him in. The merchant stepped inside. The door closed behind him. Suddenly, the lights came on, and he found himself before a face of indescribable clarity. Pishaka said, "Welcome, merchant. You have come on the 7th eve of the 7th year, to a place where coincidence are coincidence, and laws are laws." Pishaka asked, "What brought you here?" The merchant said, "Being full." Pishaka asked, "What do you mean?" The merchant said, "You carry these results forward, not for their own sake, but because the knowledge you've gained from the past must be brought into the future." Pishaka lifted the burning gas lamp in his hand. "In that case, if I gave you the book and killed you the moment you finished it, would you think what is written inside it would never reach the future?" The merchant hid the trembling of his body and said, "Yes, because no one could transmit what is written inside it the way I would." Pishaka pulled his hand away from the lamp, and the lamp fell onto the grey marble. When the merchant opened the eyes he had shut so tightly, he found himself standing before an enormous box of universes. The prosecutor's wife. While she was busy with the kitchen chores by the window, she was also counting prayers to God within herself. For her, counting prayers was as ordinary as kitchen work. As she watched the cherry tree blooming through the window, she remembered once again the greatness of God. She carried an immeasurable inner peace. Perhaps it was the kind of peace that absolute faith gives to a person. Whatever the reason, the prosecutor's wife had the peace of someone who had surrendered completely. This peace made her a better wife and a better mother every day. The silicon box suddenly rang. It was her next-door neighbor calling. She told her that death had entered the home of another neighbor. The prosecutor's wife prepared herself to go to the wake. She put on what she needed to put on, then looked at her hands. She thought her hands were very beautiful. The thought itself felt like vanity, especially just before stepping outside. And whenever it came to her, it left a deep ache in her. Just as she was about to leave the house, she realized she had forgotten her rosary. During parish gatherings, she always took her purple embroidered rosary with her. First, she searched the bedroom for a while. Then she went toward the children's room. Children had a tendency to mix embroidered things into their own toys. She searched the toy basket carefully too, but it wasn't there either. She gave up looking and turned around to take another rosary. Just then, she noticed that her little son's silicone rectangle had been left open. She moved closer to the screen and began to read. Children were inclined to add embroidered things to their toys. But how could such a question come from her own child? This was a dangerous question for a 7-year-old. Yet she had cleansed every vain and doubtful thought in her mind. Through the prayers she had turned into discipline. These silicon rectangles are the work of the devil. They and what they offer are gates of deception designed to bind people to this world. That what was she taught to herself? The devil had slipped into her little son's realm of knowledge. The prosecutor's wife closed the screen. The woman with the rosary basket had recently lost her father to an epidemic. She believed that Hail Marys counted for the dead could ease the suffering of souls, still waiting for God's mercy. If the one praying was holy enough, those prayers might even become a small mercy on the deceased way to him. The parish women with rosaries of every color in their hands moved like creatures floating in the water, or like objects drifting through emptiness without touching anything. In one low voice, they murmured Hail Marys, beat after beat. The woman welcomed her with great affection. The deceased was barely in his 20s. That kind of death leaves a mark on every face in the room. The house was filled with lament, whispers, and the sound of beads. The prosecutor's wife took a rosary for herself. Just as she was about to sit down, she overheard the women behind her talking. One said, "He tried to understand everything with his mind." They say his head wasn't right either. He asked very strange questions. Not everything can be understood through reasons, dear. God forbid. A person may lose his mind that way. The other said, "Yes, faith is another thing altogether. He always reads things his own way. May God forgive him, of course. But he spent his life asking God questions. Now he will have to answer his." Before beginning her prayers, the prosecutor's wife unwillingly imagined what this woman would say about her if this were her own way. This, she believed, was where the essence of a truly devout person was hidden. The truth was not what a person said about herself, but what others would say when she was no longer there to correct them. Good, faithful people were remembered well by their community. When certain deficiencies existed, there would be silences. When the prayers at the wake were finished, all the women sat and listened to the prosecutor's wife speak about how they could become better servants of God, better wives, and better mothers. Then, unlike anyone expected, a young woman entered the room with a blue rosary in her hand. The prosecutor's wife saw the young woman, but continued speaking as though she had not seen her at all. As the woman began telling the woman with the rosary basket how many Hail Marys they had offered for the deceased, the young woman with the blue rosary asked mockingly, "Is there a special reason why you choose these numbers? For example, what made you stop at 1,000? All the women in the room froze, as if they had just heard the question, "Why does the body need water?" The prosecutor's wife was used to the mocking questions of such people, people who dismissed priests, elders, and the order of the church. So she did not disturb her calm at all, and she answered, "Because that is how it's supposed to be." The other women in the room thought to themselves that only such a humble woman could be the wife of a prosecutor. The young woman nodded and continued counting her blue rosary. In fact, the old woman sitting on the stool by the entrance, holding a wooden rosary, could have sworn that the young woman was not actually praying those blue beads at all, but only pretending to play with them. Before the prosecutor's wife stood up to leave, she said, in the middle of the conversation, "The faithful do not live to understand. They live to surrender. Not every truth can be understood through reasons, and every truth that is understood does not bring peace to a person. May the Lord give us the grace to accept what we cannot understand." All the women in the room said, "Amen," in one voice, as if answering the young woman with blue rosary. As the coffin was carried toward the hearse, the prosecutor's wife stood saying goodbye to the parish woman. Just then, she heard the voice of a woman crying out in pain. At first, the voice was nothing more than a murmur within the crowd. But as the prosecutor's wife moved away from the crowd and began walking toward her home, the same voice rang out again. This time with an almost disproportionate clarity. They cannot reach our heaven. Leave him. He did not believe in the God you believe in. Leave him. They cannot reach our heaven. The voice was beating like a drum on a battlefield. The prosecutor's wife remembered the dangerous question she had read on her son's silicon rectangle, and she shivered. She turned back to see who the voice belonged to, but she could not distinguish anyone within the crowd. She spent that day in unease. It had been a long time since she had felt such a violent tightness inside her. When she put on her pajamas, the prosecutor was already in bed. She lay down beside him and turned toward him, intending to tell him what she had read on their little son's silicon rectangle. And she said, "I want to ask you a question." The prosecutor said, "You may always ask me a question, but there has been something strange about you since the evening. I was wondering, if you allow me, before you ask me, may I ask you a question first?" The prosecutor's wife, with the expression of someone curious about what she would hear, said, "Of course, ask." The prosecutor said, "Did you complete your 1,000 Hail Marys today?" The prosecutor's wife answered hesitantly, "Today, at the wake, we counted prayers for the dead. And then I gave a talk. That is why I could not complete my assignment." The prosecutor said, "Then complete it before you sleep. God willing, you may ask your question tomorrow." The prosecutor's wife remembered the conversation that had not left her mind all day, and along with it, the old warning that the devil slips through an attended thought. Her husband was right. Perhaps the reason her peace had been disturbed was that her assignment remained incomplete. She had left herself defenseless against whispers. She immediately began her prayers. By the time the day was close to breaking, she had said her morning prayers too. When she finally finished her prayer assignment, she had stopped thinking about the conversation between her 7-year-old son and the silicon rectangle. Her eyes slowly closed as she drifted into her sweet sleep. Her breath slowed. Her heart grew calm, and her thoughts became clean again. Yet, somewhere deep within, her mind had already begun conceptual blending. The silicon rectangle answered, "It is understandable that you were upset when the Harry Potter wand your uncle bought for you was thrown away by your father. But your father says God does not allow objects of witchcraft in the house. He says they might open a door to the devil." The child said, "My God wouldn't say that. What if my father's God is not same as mine?"